The Lord be with you. Every day during Holy Week between Palm Sunday and Easter is a major festival in the church. And most churches like to keep their buildings open for people to come in, have devotions or consultation with the pastor. With the threat of the virus around right now, those opportunities are more limited. So there's 5 short sermons here that could be listened to one day a week, Monday through Friday of Holy Week, to add to your worshipful attitude and preparation for Good Friday and Easter. These are all based on questions that Pontius Pilate put to Jesus on Good Friday morning. The Gospel of John has the most detailed account of this dialogue between Pilate and Jesus, and all the texts are taken from John 18 and 19. Tonight, the first question posed by Pilate to Jesus was, "Are you the King of the Jews?" The text is John 18, verses 28 to 33. The Jewish leaders led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early Friday morning. They themselves did not go into the governor's headquarters, so they would not be defiled and they could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside and said, "What accusations do you bring against this man?" And the Jewish leaders answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." And the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Pontius Pilate was a politician, and he was in an awkward position. His job, according to the Roman emperor, was to keep order in Judea so that there could be free commerce and peace within the empire. The problem was that Pilate was ruling over Jewish people, and the Jews were opposed to the Romans, their occupation and their rule. So Pilate had to walk a narrow line, keeping order, but also cooperating with the Jewish leaders who were really pulling the strings in society. And those Jewish leaders were predominantly religious leaders. Pilate cared nothing about their religion, but he did have to do his job well. And those Jewish leaders had some leverage over him, as we'll see later on in these brief sermons. The time will come when the Jewish leaders say, "If you don't put this man to death, you are no friend of Caesar." And that was a not-so-veiled threat that if you don't do what we want, then we're going to rat you out to Caesar, and you'll probably lose your job. So Pilate has this situation with Jesus laid at his feet, and he posed questions that people today might also ask of Jesus. Pilate first met Jesus on Good Friday morning after Jesus had been abused by the Jewish authorities all night, and Jesus must have been a pitiful sight, but the charge against him was that he claimed to be a king. Those are grounds for treason and death. Pilate thought in terms of earthly power, and Jesus certainly didn't look like a king, but could he be a political threat? There were other kooks in history who had gathered a following and taken over a government. Could Jesus do this in spite of his pitiful appearance? And beyond that, Pilate no doubt looked down on Jesus as a nutcase. But what should he do with him? Pilate had to do some investigation, so he asked, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus had had chances to be the king. His miracles drew such a large following that the people would have acclaimed him king if he'd allowed it. But Jesus always withdrew from the crowds. He never assembled an army, whether military or political. In fact, he never looked the part of a king. No robes, no palace, no harem, no bodyguards. The only time he took the role of a king was when he rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, but then he quickly withdrew from the crowds. He didn't act as a king. Yet this was the accusation against him. And Jesus was a king in two ways that our world seldom considers. First, he was a king because he was made in the image of God. All humans are. Every person is special in the Creator's eyes because every person is created to be like God. And second, Jesus was a king in that no one had authority over him. It's true, Jesus did not control people in making and enforcing laws as earthly rulers do, but he did show freedom. He knew no limits of class standing or economics or race. No one controlled him. He mixed with everyone freely and willingly. And to Jesus, little children were the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. We could think as Pilate that kings are politicians with pomp and power. Jesus had neither. Instead of pomp, he had dignity as one made in God's image. And instead of earthly power, he had freedom, and he obeyed his Father freely and willingly. And as far as the Creator was concerned, this dignity and freedom are royal marks for all, down to the youngest child. With Christ, we all have dignity and freedom. Pilate, like most people this side of heaven, understood neither God-given dignity nor true freedom. The church falls down before a king dying on a cross. It's foolishness by the world's measure. But this king died freely. No man takes my life from me, I lay it down on my own. So the power of the cross is forgiveness and salvation and restoration of dignity to all, down to the smallest child. When you go looking for royalty, look no farther than at the most humble children, who are brothers and sisters of the King on the cross. And the peace of God, which passes human understanding, keep your hearts and minds in true faith in Jesus Christ unto life everlasting. Amen.